The Mafia boss saw a man chasing a pregnant woman through the rain and asked her just one question. Do you know him? But her answer would unravel a lie so dangerous it would shake the entire city. The night it began, the storm over Ravenna Heights was relentless, the kind of storm that turned quiet streets into rivers and shadows into threats. And behind a high-end restaurant called Vellucci's, the alley was alive with the violent rhythm of rain hammering metal dumpsters and cracked pavement. The neon sign above the back door flickering in uneven pulses of blue and white that painted everything in a cold, uneasy glow, and inside, the dinner crowd had thinned to a handful of late patrons. Their conversations low and cautious, because Vellucci's was not just a place to eat. It was a place where powerful men sat, and unspoken rules were obeyed. And at the far corner booth sat Marco De Luca, a man whose name was rarely spoken out loud, but always understood. A man in his late 40s with a calm, immovable presence, his dark suit perfectly tailored, his posture relaxed but deliberate, his eyes distant as he stared through the rain-streaked window, as if watching something far beyond the storm, while across from him sat Rafael Cruz, his most trusted lieutenant, speaking in a measured tone about shipments and numbers and problems that required quiet solutions. But Marco wasn't listening. Not really. Because there was a weight in him that had been there for years, something unresolved, something that made nights like this feel heavier than they should. And Rafael noticed it, but said nothing, because some things about Marco were not meant to be questioned, and the moment might have passed like any other night. Business, silence, departure. If not for the sound that came next, a violent crash as the back door burst open with a force that echoed through the kitchen and into the dining room, snapping every head toward it. And suddenly she was there, stumbling inside like something thrown from the storm itself, a young woman, maybe in her early 20s, soaked to the bone, her clothes clinging to her, her hair plastered to her face, her breathing uneven and desperate, one hand gripping her side and the other instinctively cradling the unmistakable curve of her pregnant belly, her sneakers slipping against the tile as she caught herself on the wall, leaving faint streaks of water and dirt behind her. Her eyes wide and frantic as they darted around the room like she was searching for something. Anything that might keep her safe, and the kitchen staff froze, a waiter mid-step, a cook turning slowly from a stove. The entire space caught in that strange suspended moment where no one quite knows what to do. And then she saw the dining room, saw the people, saw the corner booth, and she moved toward it not because she knew who sat there, but because it felt like the only solid thing in a world that had suddenly become chaos, and she made it only a few steps before her strength gave out, her knees buckling as she collapsed onto the carpet beside one of the tables, her breath hitching as she struggled to stay conscious. And Marco was already on his feet. Before anyone else moved, something instinctive pulling him forward, something older than logic, Rafael rising beside him, alert now, his hand drifting subtly toward his jacket. And when Marco reached her, he saw everything at once, the bruise forming along her cheek, the split in her lip, the fear in her eyes that wasn't just fear, but something deeper, something that came from being hunted. And she looked up at him like he was the last barrier between her and whatever was coming, her voice breaking as she whispered, "Please, don't let him take me." And then the door slammed open again, harder this time, and the man who stepped inside did not look like someone out of control. He looked composed, deliberate, his movements smooth as he adjusted his coat like he had simply walked in from the rain, tall and broad-shouldered, his expression calm but his eyes sharp, scanning the room until they landed on her. And when he spoke, his voice carried the kind of authority that expected obedience. "There you are," he said, stepping forward. "You've made enough of a scene. Let's go." And the woman flinched violently, shrinking back against the floor, her hand gripping the fabric near her stomach as if protecting the child inside her. And the man continued walking, barely acknowledging the others in the room, because in his mind, they didn't matter, because men, like him, were used to getting what they wanted without resistance. And maybe he would have reached her, maybe he would have taken her, if Marco hadn't spoken. Just one word, quiet but absolute. "Stop." And something in the tone made the man pause mid-step, his eyes shifting toward Marco for the first time, taking him in, measuring him, recognizing perhaps that this situation was not as simple as he had assumed. And yet he recovered quickly, offering a tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. I apologize, he said smoothly. My wife is unwell. Pregnancy has been difficult. She gets confused, emotional. I'll take her home now. But Marco didn't look at him. Not yet. Instead, he knelt slowly beside the woman, lowering himself to her level, his movements calm, controlled, as if the chaos around them didn't exist, and when he spoke, his voice was softer now, steady in a way that cut through her panic. Do you know him? And for a moment, everything seemed to hold its breath. The storm outside, the people inside, even the man standing behind them, and the woman's eyes locked onto Marco's, searching, desperate, as if weighing the risk of telling the truth against the danger of staying silent. And then she shook her head, tears mixing with rainwater on her face as her voice came out in a fragile whisper that carried further than it should have. No, he's not my husband. And in that instant, something shifted, something irreversible, because the man behind them stopped smiling. The room went completely still, and Marco DeLuca, the man no one dared to cross, finally turned his full attention toward him, and the night that should have ended quietly had just become something else entirely. The man's smile didn't vanish all at once. It tightened, strained at the edges as Elena's words hung in the air, and for a brief moment the entire room seemed to hold its breath, every movement stilled under the weight of what had just been said, while Marco stood slowly, his silence far more commanding than any raised voice, and Raphael shifted subtly beside him, already understanding that the situation had crossed a line that couldn't be undone, and Victor let out a short, forced laugh, shaking his head as if the entire scene were nothing more than an inconvenience. She's confused, he said, his tone sharper now. She's not well. She's been like this for weeks. But Elena shook her head quickly, her fear raw and visible as she pressed herself further back, one hand instinctively shielding her stomach, and Marco didn't look at Victor yet, instead keeping his focus on her, his voice calm and steady as he said, "You're safe, just talk." And something in the way he said it, something certain and unwavering, seemed to give her just enough strength to continue, her words coming out uneven at first. "He's been following me, watching me, showing up at my work," she said, swallowing hard. "He's a donor there. Everyone trusts him. No one questions him." Her voice trembled as she added, "I thought he was just being friendly at first." Victor scoffed, taking a step forward, but Raphael moved just enough to block him without touching him, a silent warning that stopped him in place. And Elena continued, her breathing unsteady. "Then he started asking about my life, where I lived, if I was alone, if anyone would notice if I was gone." The words seemed to echo, heavy and chilling, and Marco's expression remained still, but his eyes darkened slightly. "When I got pregnant," she said, her voice dropping. "He said it was a problem, that it couldn't happen." She shook her head, tears mixing with rain on her face. "He told me to get rid of it." Victor's composure cracked further, his voice rising. "This is ridiculous. You're listening to a story." But Marco finally turned his gaze toward him, and that single look was enough to silence him completely, because there was no anger in it, only a cold certainty that made arguments useless, and Elena kept going, clinging to the moment before it could disappear. "I tried to go to the police, but they didn't believe me," she said, her voice breaking. "He told them I was unstable, that I imagined things, and they believed him. Because of who he is." Marco's jaw tightened slightly, the smallest sign of something deeper stirring beneath the surface. "Tonight he came to my apartment," she continued, her words rushing now. "He said it was the last time I could say no, that if I didn't do what he wanted, I wouldn't be a problem anymore." She took a shaky breath. "So I ran. I just ran." Silence followed, thick and heavy, the storm outside now the only sound filling the space between them, and Victor straightened slightly, trying one last time to regain control, though the confidence was gone now, replaced with something sharper, more desperate. "You're making a mistake," he said, his voice low. "You don't know who I am. You don't know what I can do." And Marco took a slow step closer, his presence alone enough to shift the balance of the room completely, his voice quiet but absolute as he finally responded. "No," he said, holding Victor's gaze without blinking. "I know exactly what you are." And the faintest trace of a smile touched his lips, not warm, not kind, but final. "And now," he added, as Raphael and the others moved to close the space around them, So does everyone else. Victor tried to run. That was the moment everything finally broke. The polished image, the controlled voice, the illusion of power. And he turned toward the back door with sudden, desperate speed. But he didn't make it more than a few steps before Raphael caught him. Not violently, just firmly enough to remind him that this room no longer belonged to him. And the panic that followed was raw and unmistakable. "You can't do this," he snapped, struggling. "I have connections. People will come looking for me." But no one moved to help him. No one spoke in his defense, because whatever authority he once carried had dissolved the moment Elena spoke the truth out loud. And Marco didn't raise his voice, didn't step forward aggressively. He simply said, "Sit." And Victor did, because something in Marco's tone made resistance feel pointless, like fighting gravity itself. And within the hour, a detective Marco trusted, Inspector Daniela Varga, arrived, her sharp eyes taking in the scene before, settling on Elena, who told her everything again, this time with more clarity, more strength, because now someone was listening and writing it down, and piece by piece, Victor's world unraveled under real scrutiny, the lies that had protected him no longer holding under the weight of truth. And in the days that followed, evidence surfaced, records, patterns, things that had been ignored before suddenly impossible to overlook. And Victor Hale, the respected man no one questioned, was arrested. Quietly but definitively, his influence no longer enough to shield him, while Elena was taken somewhere safe, far from the fear that had chased her through the rain that night. And weeks later, when the storm had long passed, and the city had moved on as it always did, she returned to Vellucci's, not running this time, but walking, steady, her hand resting gently over her stomach, her eyes clearer than before. And she found Marco at the same corner booth, exactly where he always was, and for a moment neither of them spoke, because words felt smaller than what had happened. "I kept the baby," she said finally, her voice soft but certain, and Marco nodded once, a quiet approval, and she placed a folded note in front of him before turning to leave, and when he opened it later, it read, "You asked me if I knew him. No one ever asked me anything before. They only told me I was wrong, but you asked. And that changed everything." And Marco sat there long after she was gone, the noise of the restaurant returning around him, the world continuing as it always did. But something inside him had shifted, not fixed, not healed, but lighter in a way he hadn't felt in years, because this time, when someone needed help, he hadn't looked away.